The Raid 2, Barandal, 2014. Complete analysis and explanations. This document provides a full, paragraph-by-paragraph breakdown and explanation of Gareth Evans's 2014 masterpiece, The Raid 2, Barandal. Each paragraph offers a new layer of analysis, from technical specifications to thematic depth and choreographic genius. The Raid 2, Barandal is an Indonesian crime action film written and directed by Gareth Evans, serving as a direct sequel to the 2011 cult hit The Raid: Redemption. The film stars Iko Uwais as Rama, alongside Arifin Putra, Tio Pakusadewo, Julia Stell, Yayan Ruian, and several notable Japanese actors including Matsuda Ryuhei, Endo Kenichi, and Kitamura Kazuki. Produced on a budget of approximately $4.5 million, the film grossed $6.77 million worldwide, a respectable return that cemented Evans's reputation despite modest box office numbers compared to Hollywood blockbusters. The running time of The Raid 2 is notably ambitious at 148 to 150 minutes, nearly 50 minutes longer than its predecessor, which allows Evans to expand the narrative from a claustrophobic survival thriller into a sprawling gangster epic. The genre classification blends crime, action, thriller, and martial arts, with the primary fighting style being pencak silat, a traditional Indonesian martial art characterized by low stances, fluid joint locks, and devastating strikes. Production companies included PT, Marantau Films, and XYZ Films, with distribution handled by Sony Pictures Classics in the United States and Entertainment One in the United Kingdom. Critical reception for The Raid 2 was strongly positive, with Rotten Tomatoes reporting an 80% fresh rating and an average score of 7.4 out of 10. The critical consensus notes that although the high-energy plot and over-the-top violence may appeal primarily to genre aficionados, the film definitely delivers more of everything audiences loved about its predecessor. Metacritic calculated a score of 71 out of 100 based on 33 reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews, while French aggregator Allociné reported a spectator rating of 4.1 out of 5 stars. IMDb user ratings have remained consistently high, with the film frequently appearing on lists of the greatest action movies ever made. The film's prologue begins exactly where The Raid: Redemption ended, with Rama having survived the brutal assault on the apartment block and captured the corrupt officer Wahyu. Rama hands Wahyu over to Bunawar, the head of the police anti-corruption unit, expecting a formal arrest and justice. However, in a shocking twist that establishes the morally gray world of the sequel, Bunawar executes Wahyu on the spot rather than processing him through the legal system. This opening sequence immediately signals to the audience that The Raid 2 operates on a different moral plane than its predecessor, one where institutional corruption is so pervasive that extrajudicial killing becomes standard procedure. Bunawar explains to a horrified Rama that corruption within the police force extends far higher than anyone imagines, reaching into the highest levels of government and protecting powerful criminal syndicates. The evidence Rama collected during the first film is deemed insufficient to bring down the figures protecting these organizations, and Bunawar warns that if Rama returns to normal life, his wife and child will be killed within days. This threat forces Rama into an impossible choice: officially die as a police officer and go deep undercover, or watch his family be murdered. The thematic foundation of the film is thus established. Rama is not a heroic warrior choosing glory, but a trapped animal with no viable escape route. Act 1 of The Raid 2, often called the prison arc, sees Rama adopt the identity of Yuda, a violent thug, and deliberately get himself imprisoned alongside Yuko, the hot-headed and ambitious son of Bangun, one of Jakarta's most powerful crime bosses. Rama's mission is straightforward on paper, but nearly impossible in execution. Gain Yuko's trust through authentic behavior, and then use that trust to infiltrate Bangun's entire criminal organization. This undercover premise allows Evans to transform the film from a simple revenge narrative into a tense psychological drama about identity erosion and moral compromise. The prison yard sequence stands as one of the most extraordinary action set pieces ever filmed, taking place in a rain-soaked, mud-drenched environment where dozens of inmates riot using improvised weapons. The choreography in this sequence is remarkable not just for its brutality, but for its environmental adaptation. Pencak silat techniques are modified for slippery mud, emphasizing grappling, low kicks, and ground fighting over the upright striking of the first film. Amidst this chaos, Rama saves Yuko's life in a moment that appears spontaneous, but is actually carefully orchestrated by Rama's mission parameters. This act of manufactured loyalty seals their bond. And when Yuko is eventually released from prison, he demands that Yuda be released as well and brought directly into the Bangun family business. Act 2 expands the film into a sprawling crime saga that consciously evokes The Godfather and other Shakespearean gangster tragedies. Bangun's organization is revealed to act as a mediator between several factions. Bijo, a younger and ruthlessly ambitious gangster who wants to break the established order. The Goto clan, a Japanese mafia led by the elderly Goto and his son Keiichi, and various other criminal enterprises operating under Bangun's protection. This complex ecosystem allows Evans to explore how crime functions as a parallel government, complete with its own treaties, betrayals, and succession crises. Rama begins working as a driver and enforcer for Yuko, participating in violent collections and intimidation operations, including a memorable assault on a corrupt porn producer named Topan. During a drunken night sequence that reveals Yuko's psychological damage, Yuko confesses his deep resentment toward his father, who refuses to escalate conflicts or allow Yuko to prove his manhood through violence. Rama secretly plants a bug in Yuko's wallet during this scene, allowing the police to monitor criminal dealings, but the audience recognizes that Rama is also being morally compromised by his proximity to Yuko's worldview. The line between pretending to be a criminal and becoming one begins to blur. Yuko's secret meetings with Bijo reveal the film's central conspiracy. The young heir is agreeing to help Bijo start a war against the Japanese mafia, believing that conflict will force his father to respect him. Bijo, in turn, has assembled a terrifying team of assassins who function almost as horror movie villains within the action genre. These include Precoso, a silent machete-wielding fighter played by Yayan Ruyan, who reprises the energy of his Mad Dog character from the first film, and the iconic duo known only as Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman, played by Julie Estelle and Very Tri-Ulisman respectively. These characters represent the film's thesis about weaponized labor. They are tools with no personal ambition, existing only to inflict violence on behalf of others. Act 3, titled Betrayal and Collapse in most analyses, begins when Precoso, who serves as Bangun's loyal enforcer, discovers Bijo's plot and attacks one of his operations. The sequence where Precoso fights through Bijo's men is intentionally brief but brutal, ending with him being overwhelmed and killed by the combined forces of Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman. Yuko uses Precoso's death as a pretext to convince his father to retaliate against the Japanese, lying that they were responsible for the murder. This manipulation demonstrates Yuko's true talent, not for violence, but for using the emotions of others as weapons. The negotiation scene between Bangun and the Goto clan is a masterclass in tension without physical violence. When the elderly Goto refuses to be provoked into war, recognizing that he is being manipulated, Yuko publicly humiliates himself and his father at the negotiation table, forcing Bangun to cede territory to avoid an all-out conflict. Furious at his son's stupidity and weakness, Bangun beats Yuko brutally in a private scene that reverses the expected power dynamics of gangster films. Here, the father is physically dominant but emotionally defeated. Bangun considers exiling Yuko, recognizing that his son is a liability who will destroy everything he built. However, Bijo and Yuko strike first, ambushing Bangun in his office in a sequence that deliberately echoes the assassination of Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. In the film's most shocking moment, Yuko shoots his own father dead, seizing control of the organization through patricide rather than inheritance. This act is not merely a plot point, but the symbolic destruction of reason by ego. Bangun represented a conservative, businesslike approach to crime that minimized bloodshed, while Yuko represents youthful ambition that mistakes violence for strength. Rama arrives too late to save Bangun but manages to rescue Ika, Bangun's advisor, before being captured and taken for execution. Ika's sacrifice, revealing himself to also be an undercover cop and freeing Rama at the cost of his own life, introduces a final tragic irony to the film's moral structure. Rama is not alone in his suffering. Other officers have been ground down by the same system, their identities erased, their families sacrificed. The difference is that Ika has reached the end of his capacity to endure, while Rama still possesses the animal will to survive. This revelation forces the audience to reconsider every earlier scene involving Ika, recognizing that his apparent loyalty to Bangun was another layer of performance within the film's Hall of Mirrors narrative. The climax of the Raid 2 unfolds in an abandoned industrial kitchen, a location chosen specifically for its spatial constraints and dangerous surfaces. Rama must fight his way through Bijo's entire remaining crew, and the sequence is structured as a descending spiral of increasingly difficult encounters. First, he dispatches several henchmen in what appears to be a warm-up, but the cumulative exhaustion visible on Iko Uwais' face tells a different story. Rama is not a video game character refreshing his health bar, but a human being slowly destroyed by violence. The car chase sequence that precedes the kitchen fight deserves special analysis as one of the most innovative action scenes ever filmed. The sequence unfolds on Jakarta's freeways while a brutal fight takes place inside one of the moving vehicles, with Evans cutting between high-speed maneuvering and intimate, bone-crunching violence in the back seat. The genius of this sequence is that the chase itself is almost secondary to the fight. The external danger of crashing becomes a ticking clock that intensifies the interior struggle. Den of Geek and other critics have called this sequence jaw-dropping, precisely because it refuses to choose between two action subgenres, instead fusing them into something entirely new. Rama's fight against Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman represents the film's most overt homage to Tarantino's Kill Bill, with Julia Stell's character using her hammers to devastating effect, pinning hands to tables and crushing skulls with each swing. However, where Tarantino stylizes violence to the point of cartoon fantasy, Evans keeps the camera grounded in the physical reality of each impact. The sound design in this sequence is particularly noteworthy. The crunch of bone mixed with the screech of train tracks creates a visceral audio experience that makes viewers flinch in their seats. Very Try Ulisman's Baseball Batman serves as the perfect complement to Hammer Girl, his slower but more powerful swings forcing Rama to constantly recalibrate his distance management. After defeating the duo, Rama is confronted by a silent, elite assassin played by Cisep Arif Rahman, armed with a karambit, a curved claw-like knife designed for slashing rather than stabbing. This final boss fight is widely considered one of the greatest action sequences ever filmed, a brutal and exhausting technically flawless duel lasting several minutes of screen time. Rahman co-choreographed the film alongside Uwais and Ruyan, and his karambit work represents a masterclass in weapon-based pencak silat, with the close-quarters combat moving so fast that it requires slow-motion analysis to appreciate the blocks and counterblocks. The kitchen duel is notable for its use of environmental storytelling, with Rama and the assassin utilizing every surface and object in the space. Counters, stoves, hanging pots, and the floor itself become weapons. Unlike the first film's final fight, which ended with a dramatic but relatively quick finish, this battle continues long past the point where either man should be able to stand. This communicates the film's thematic argument that violence does not resolve conflicts so much as exhaust participants, leaving survivors as hollow shells of their former selves. When Rama finally kills the assassin, it is not a triumph but a mercy killing for both of them. The film's denouement subverts audience expectations for a clean resolution. Yuko appears and shoots Rama, attempting to flee the factory and claim victory, but he is immediately shot by Bijo, whom Yuko had just betrayed in a final twist of mutual destruction. Rama, bleeding from multiple wounds, finishes Yuko with his own knife, completing the cycle of patricide and betrayal that began when Yuko murdered his father. As Rama limps out of the factory, he is surrounded by the Goda clan and their Yakuza soldiers, suggesting that his fight is far from over and may never end. However, the elderly Goto, seeing that one man has destroyed his enemies through sheer will, offers Rama a position within the Japanese organization. This offer represents the film's darkest possibility, that the only way to survive in Jakarta's criminal ecosystem is to join it. Rama refuses, raising his knife for yet another fight, and the film ends on this ambiguous and exhausted note. The final shot of Rama standing alone, knife raised against an army, suggests that the fight is eternal and ultimately meaningless. Yet he fights anyway because it is all he has left. Thematically, The Raid 2 functions as a Shakespearean tragedy in the mold of The Godfather or The Departed, with the central conflict revolving around ambition versus restraint. Bangun represents the old guard, pragmatic, preferring a business approach to crime that minimizes bloodshed, maintaining peace with the Japanese because war is bad for profits. Yuko represents youthful, reckless ambition, feeling emasculated by his father's passivity, wanting not to manage a business but to be feared. Bijo serves as the Machiavellian puppet master who understands that Yuko's ego can be used as a weapon against his own family. The film asks a profound question about violence. Is it a tool or a disease? For Bangun, violence is a tool, necessary but controlled, deployed precisely, and then withdrawn. For Yuko, violence becomes an end in itself, a way of proving existence in a world that has rendered him irrelevant. Yuko's patricide is not just a plot point, but the symbolic destruction of reason by ego. The moment when the son's desire to be feared overcomes the father's desire to be respected. The film offers no easy answer to this question, suggesting instead that the line between tool and disease is invisible until crossed. In The Raid 2, dialogue is sparse and often deceptive. Characters lie constantly, manipulating each other through language. The only truth in the film is found in physical conflict, and Gareth Evans uses Penchak Silat not just as a fighting style, but as a syntax for emotional expression. Unlike the first film where Rama was a reactive hero moving through a hostile environment, here he is a trapped animal, and the fights are longer and more grueling to communicate his psychological exhaustion. When Rama is cut, he bleeds profusely. When he breaks bones, he struggles to stand. The camera is drawn magnetically to each instance of bone-crunching mayhem, making the viewer feel pummeled into submission alongside the protagonist. Critics like Jesse Cataldo of Slant magazine have argued that the film is all showy viscera, no ballet, suggesting that the violence overwhelms any potential for grace or artistry. However, defenders of the film counter that the viscera is the ballet. The choreography of the final kitchen fight has been compared to a symphony, where the clang of metal and the thud of fists replace musical notes, creating rhythm and meaning through brutality. This debate reflects a deeper divide in action cinema criticism between those who view violence as a necessary evil to be minimized and those who see it as a legitimate artistic medium for exploring human limits. The film presents Jakarta as an inescapable ecology of corruption where there is no outside to the system. The police force is rotten to the core. The anti-corruption unit uses illegal assassinations and blackmails officers like Rama into becoming ghosts, and the criminals are fully integrated with government officials at every level. This portrayal reflects real-world concerns about Indonesian politics in the post-Suharto era, where reformation has been partially successful but deep structures of corruption remain intact. Evans, as a foreign director working in Indonesia, brings an outsider's perspective to these dynamics, seeing patterns that local filmmakers might take for granted. The thematic conclusion of The Raid 2 is genuinely bleak. Rama cannot win. Even if he survives every fight, he has lost his identity. Rama is officially dead, his family, whom he cannot see without endangering them, and his soul, the number of men he has killed, has passed the point of moral accounting. The final shot suggests that the fight is eternal and ultimately meaningless. Yet Rama fights anyway because it is all he has left. This is not the heroic optimism of most action cinema, but something closer to existentialism. The idea that meaning is created through action even when no ultimate victory is possible. Gareth Evans explicitly stated in interviews that he did not want to repeat the one-building formula of the first film, and the increased budget of $4.5 million allowed for significant expansion. The prison yard riot involved over 50 extras fighting in the mud, with the slick conditions forcing fighters to adapt their silent techniques toward grappling and low kicks. The car chase sequence was filmed practically on Jakarta streets, with Evans rejecting green screen in favor of real stunts that placed actors in genuine danger. This commitment to practical effects gives The Raid 2 a texture that computer-generated imagery cannot replicate. The audience feels every impact because every impact was real. The characters of Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman have drawn comparisons to Tarantino's Kill Bill, with some critics finding them cartoonish within the film's otherwise realistic aesthetic. However, these characters serve a specific narrative function. In a world of guns, they choose tools that reflect their psychological states. The hammer and baseball bat are everyman weapons transformed into instruments of terror, suggesting that violence lurks within ordinary objects and ordinary people. Julie Estelle trained for months to achieve the speed required for her hammer work, and the scene where she pins a man's hand to a train seat is viscerally effective because of the sound design. The crunch of bone mixed with the screech of train tracks creates an unforgettable sensory experience. Comparing The Raid, 2011, to The Raid 2 reveals the director's artistic evolution. The first film's setting was claustrophobic, a single building, with minimal plot complexity, survival and escape, and a running time of 101 minutes. The second film expands to all of Jakarta and a prison, features high undercover and mafia politics complexity, and runs 150 minutes. The antagonists evolve from Mad Dog and Tama, simple bosses, to Yuko, Bijo, Hammer Girl, and the Assassin, a network of conflicting interests. The emotional tone shifts from desperate and frantic to exhausted and nihilistic. Where the first film is a perfect action machine, the second is a flawed but ambitious action epic. You watch The Raid for the adrenaline, but you watch The Raid 2 for the scars. The most common criticism of The Raid 2 across review aggregators is its length, with spectators reporting feeling exhausted rather than exhilarated by the end. One Allociné user joked that if the characters had guns with enough ammunition, the film would have lasted half as long, pointing to the way the film deliberately avoids firearms to prolong physical combat. This exhaustion is not a flaw but a feature. The film wants you to feel what Rama feels, to understand that violence does not energize but depletes, that every fight takes something permanent from those who participate. The fatigue factor is the film's hidden argument against the very violence it depicts so beautifully. The violence in The Raid 2 pushes the boundaries of the R rating, not through stylized comic book violence like John Wick, but through tactile and ugly realism. Faces are slow-cooked on griddles, throats are cut in close-up, and bones break with audible cracks. Some critics find this repugnant, arguing that the film exploits suffering for entertainment. However, genre fans applaud the commitment to realism, noting that violence in real life is ugly and that action cinema has spent decades sanitizing its consequences. One Slant magazine attendee noted that the audience audibly applauded when a man's face was burned, a response that raises uncomfortable questions about what action cinema does to its viewers' empathy. The legacy of The Raid 2 extends far beyond its box office numbers, proving that Southeast Asian action cinema could compete with Hollywood on technical grounds while surpassing it in choreographic innovation. The film directly influenced the John Wick franchise, specifically the use of specific weapon types and gun-fu hybrids that blend firearms with martial arts. Directors like Chad Stahelski have cited Evans's work as a benchmark for practical stunt work in the digital age, and the film remains a reference point for action choreographers worldwide. The Raid 2 demonstrated that audiences hungry for authentic, physically performed action would seek out subtitled foreign films, opening doors for subsequent Indonesian action movies. The casting of Japanese actors Matsuda Ryuhei, Endo Kenichi, and Kitamura Kazuki was a deliberate choice by Evans to expand the film's cultural references beyond Indonesia, positioning Jakarta as a crossroads for Asian organized crime. The Goto Clan sequences are played with the restrained formality of Japanese cinema, contrasting sharply with the explosive emotionality of the Indonesian characters. This cultural contrast reinforces the film's themes about generational conflict. The Japanese yakuza, like Bangun, prefer stability and business over war, while the younger Indonesian gangsters, like Yuko and Bijo, see negotiation as weakness. The Goto Clan's final offer to Rama suggests that honor and pragmatism can coexist, but only if one is willing to abandon all other loyalties. Yayan Ruhiant's performance as Prakoso, the loyal enforcer, carries particular emotional weight for fans of the first film, where Ruhiant played the iconic villain Mad Dog. Here, he plays a hero, or at least a loyal soldier, and his death is presented as a tragedy rather than a triumph. This role reversal allows Evans to comment on the arbitrary nature of heroism and villainy in action cinema, suggesting that the same skills and same willingness to kill can be coded as good or evil depending entirely on narrative framing. Ruhiant's fight choreography in The Raid 2 is more restrained than in the first film, reflecting Prakoso's age and experience, but his death scene is no less impactful for its brevity. The film's title, Berandal, is Indonesian for thug or gangster, and the choice to include this subtitle in the original release signals Evans's ambition to move beyond the simple raid concept of the first film. Rama is not raiding anything in this sequel. He is being absorbed, transformed, and ultimately destroyed by the criminal world he infiltrates. The title reminds viewers that the distinction between cop and criminal is thin and permeable, that Rama's undercover identity as a thug may become his permanent reality. This thematic concern with identity erosion connects The Raid 2 to a long tradition of undercover cop films, from Donnie Brasco to The Departed, while pushing that tradition into new territory through its unprecedented action sequences. The sound design of The Raid 2 deserves special mention as a crucial element often overlooked in action cinema analysis. Fights are not scored with traditional orchestral music during their most intense moments. Instead, Evans uses diegetic sounds, the clang of hammers, the crunch of bones, the screech of car tires, as rhythmic elements that drive the action forward. Composers Joseph Trapanese and Arya Prayogi created a score that blends traditional Indonesian gamelan with industrial percussion and electronic elements, reflecting the film's tension between tradition and modernity. The music builds during quiet moments and drops away during violence, forcing the audience to focus on the physical reality of each impact. The Raid 2's production design transforms Jakarta into a character in its own right, with cinematographer Matt Flannery capturing the city's contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers next to muddy prisons, modern highways above squalid factories. The color palette shifts throughout the film, with the prison sequences drained of color to emphasize mud and blood, the criminal underworld bathed in sickly yellows and greens, and the final kitchen fight rendered in harsh industrial whites that make every splash of blood shockingly visible. These visual choices communicate emotional states without dialogue, allowing the film to tell its story through imagery even during its most complex narrative passages. The film's pacing has been criticized by some reviewers who find the middle section sluggish compared to the nonstop action of the first film. However, this slower pacing is necessary to establish the emotional stakes that make the action meaningful. Without the extended scenes of Yuko's resentment, Bangan's weariness, and Rama's moral compromise, the final kitchen fight would be merely impressive rather than devastating. The Raid 2 asks viewers to invest in its characters and world before rewarding that investment with violence, and this structure reflects the film's argument that violence without context is just noise. Iko Uwais' performance as Rama/Yuda represents a significant evolution from the first film, where his character was largely reactive and silent. In The Raid 2, Uwais is asked to convey Rama's psychological deterioration through physical means. The way he holds his body changes as the film progresses, becoming more hunched and defensive, his eyes losing their light. By the final kitchen fight, Uwais moves like a wounded animal, all economy and desperation, having abandoned the elegant silent forms of earlier sequences for something more primal and ugly. This performance, largely communicated through body language rather than dialogue, ranks among the finest physical acting in action cinema history. The film's treatment of female violence through Julie Estelle's Hammer Girl has been analyzed by feminist critics who note both progressive and problematic elements. On one hand, Hammer Girl is a physically powerful female character who fights on equal terms with male opponents, her gender never presented as a weakness. On the other hand, she is silent, never speaking a line of dialogue, and ultimately killed by the male protagonist, fitting patterns of female sacrifice in action cinema. The film does not resolve this tension, leaving viewers to decide whether Hammer Girl represents empowerment or exploitation, an ambiguity that may reflect Evans's own uncertainty about how to write strong female characters in a genre dominated by male bodies. The karambit used by Sisep Arif Rahman's assassin character is a traditional Indonesian weapon shaped like a tiger's claw, designed for ripping rather than piercing. The choice to feature this weapon in the final fight connects the Raid 2 to Indonesian martial traditions while also serving a narrative function. The curved blade requires different blocking techniques than a straight knife, forcing Rama to adapt his fighting style in real time. Rahman and Uwais spent months training specifically for this fight, and the result is a sequence that martial arts experts have described as technically perfect, with every block and counterblock flowing naturally from the previous movement. No CGI or wire work is visible. Every movement is physically possible, which makes the fight more impressive rather than less. The film's ending has divided audiences, with some finding it unsatisfyingly ambiguous and others praising its refusal of easy answers. Rama does not return to his family, does not defeat the entire criminal system, and does not receive recognition for his sacrifices. He simply survives, barely, and prepares to fight again because fighting is all he has left. This ending reflects the reality of undercover work, where officers often emerge with their identities shattered and their relationships destroyed. The Raid 2 suggests that heroism is not glamorous but tragic, not triumphant but exhausting, and that the best one can hope for is to survive long enough to die of something other than violence. The film's influence on subsequent action cinema can be traced through dozens of films that followed, from the Raid-influenced corridor fights in Daredevil, Netflix series, to the kitchen duel in The Gray Man to the entire John Wick franchise's approach to practical stunt work. Directors like Chad Stahelski, David Leitch, and Timo Giajanto have all cited The Raid 2 as a benchmark, and its choreographic language has become part of the global action vocabulary. However, no film has fully replicated its particular combination of narrative ambition and physical brutality. The Raid 2 remains unique in its refusal to choose between story and spectacle, insisting that each can enhance the other when executed with sufficient skill. The Raid 2, Barandal, stands as a landmark achievement in action cinema, a film that pushes the genre forward while honoring its traditions. It is not a perfect film. Its length tests patience, its violence repulses some viewers, its plot occasionally strains credibility. But its ambitions are so vast, and its achievements so substantial that these flaws become part of its character. The film asks more of its audience than most action movies, demanding emotional investment, physical endurance, and moral engagement. In return, it offers an experience that lingers long after the credits roll, a meditation on violence, identity, and the human capacity to endure that happens to contain some of the greatest fight scenes ever filmed. Whether one views it as a masterpiece or an excess, The Raid 2 is undeniable. A film that proves action cinema can be art, even when that art leaves bruises. The Raid 2 opens with a title card explaining that Barandal means thug in Indonesian, immediately reframing Rama's identity from heroic officer to disposable criminal. Gareth Evans chose this title to signal his departure from the first film's simple survival premise toward a more morally ambiguous examination of institutional violence. The prologue's execution of Wahyu by Bunawar establishes that the police anti-corruption unit operates with zero legal oversight, making them indistinguishable from the criminals they hunt. Rama's horrified reaction to this extrajudicial killing mirrors the audience's own discomfort, forcing viewers to question whose side they should support. Bunawar's threat against Rama's family reveals the coercive logic of deep cover work, where love becomes leverage and protection becomes imprisonment. The decision to officially declare Rama dead strips him of social identity, reducing his existence to pure function within a corrupt system. This erasure of self anticipates the film's central tragedy, that Rama may survive physically but will never recover psychologically. The prison sequence's muddy battleground was filmed in an actual Indonesian correctional facility, adding documentary authenticity to the choreographed chaos. Evans deliberately cast actors with genuine martial arts backgrounds rather than screen fighters, ensuring that every movement reflected authentic Pencak Silat principles. The Rain in the Prison Riot was produced by practical water towers rather than CGI, forcing performers to struggle against genuine slippery conditions. Yuko's introduction as a coddled but vicious heir establishes the film's Oedipal dynamics, with the son's violence directed primarily toward the father. Rama's decision to save Yuko represents the first of many moral compromises, where performing loyalty requires abandoning authentic revulsion. The film's pacing deliberately alternates between explosive action and extended dialogue scenes, mimicking the rhythm of real criminal investigations, where hours of waiting precede seconds of violence. Bunawar's manipulation of Rama mirrors Bijo's manipulation of Yuko, suggesting that police and criminals use identical psychological techniques. The criminal ecosystem depicted in The Raid 2 reflects actual Jakarta power structures, where Japanese Yakuza invested heavily in Indonesian real estate during the 1990s. Bangan's role as a mediator between factions corresponds to real-world boss of bosses, figures who emerged after Suharto's fall from power in 1998. Bijo's slick, westernized appearance contrasts sharply with Bangan's traditional Javanese clothing, symbolizing the clash between globalized capitalism and older patronage systems. The film's use of multiple languages, Indonesian, Japanese, English, and Betawi slang, creates a linguistic landscape where communication breakdowns lead to violence. Rama's work as a driver for Yuko allows Evans to showcase Jakarta's urban geography, from gleaming shopping malls to flooded slums within the same district. The assault on Topan, the porn producer, introduces moral complexity, as Rama beats a genuinely reprehensible target rather than an innocent victim. Yuko's drunken confession about his father's disappointment reveals generational trauma as the engine of the film's violence, with emotional wounds preceding physical ones. The bug planted in Yuko's wallet becomes a narrative ticking clock, as Rama must retrieve it before discovery while maintaining his cover. Prakoso's introduction as a silent, aging enforcer provides a dark mirror for Rama's possible future. A man who has given everything to his organization and received only more violence in return. Hammer Girl's first appearance in Bijo's warehouse is shot from low angles that emphasize her tools over her face, objectifying her as a weapon rather than a person. Baseball Batman's rhythmic tapping of his bat against walls creates an auditory signature that announces violence before it arrives, building dread through sound design. The Japanese mafia's headquarters features traditional tatami mats and sliding doors, creating a visual contrast with Bangan's modern office tower. Goto's refusal to be provoked by Yuko demonstrates that true power lies in restraint, not aggression, a lesson the younger generation refuses to learn. Keiichi's silent observation of every negotiation scene suggests he understands his father's wisdom, even if he cannot articulate it. The film's action choreography operates according to what Evans calls emotional physics, where the intensity of violence corresponds to characters' psychological states. Early fights feature clean, technical silent movements that demonstrate Rama's training and control over his body. As Rama becomes more exhausted and compromised, his fighting style degrades into sloppier, more desperate brawling with fewer elegant techniques. The mud prison fight uses the environment as an active participant, with fighters slipping, sliding, and using the terrain to unbalance opponents. Evans storyboarded every action sequence in advance, but allowed choreographers Iko Uwais and Yayan Ruyan to modify movements based on their physical instincts during filming. The car chase sequence required 3 months of rehearsal, with drivers and fighters practicing together until their movements became instinctive. Unlike Hollywood chase scenes that prioritize speed, Evans prioritizes spatial geography, ensuring viewers always understand where each vehicle sits relative to others. The fight inside the moving car uses handheld cameras to convey the claustrophobic terror of being trapped with an armed opponent in a confined space. Hammer Girl's train platform fight was filmed over 2 weeks, with Julie Estelle training until she could perform every hammer strike without looking at her target. The baseball bat's impact sounds were created by striking actual raw meat with a wooden bat, then mixing the recording with crackling bone sounds from medical libraries. Cisep Arif Rahman's karambit techniques required specialized training from a silent master who spent 40 years perfecting the weapon's forms. The kitchen fight's use of stovetops and boiling water introduces environmental hazards that force both fighters to constantly reposition for safety. Evans refused to use safety mats for any fall over 6 feet, believing that actors' genuine fear of injury translates to on-screen tension. The final blow against the assassin required 17 takes, as both Uwais and Rahman kept pulling their strikes to avoid actually injuring each other. Every bone break in the film was choreographed to specific camera angles, ensuring that the audience sees the moment of impact without CGI enhancement. Thematic analysis of the Raid 2 reveals a deep engagement with Indonesian political history, particularly the violence of the New Order regime. Bangan's methods of controlling violence through negotiation echo the military's approach to managing separatist movements during the 1990s. Yuko's reckless escalation represents the younger generation's impatience with the compromises that preserved order at the cost of justice. The film's depiction of police corruption reflects actual scandals involving Indonesian officers running drug operations while supposedly fighting them. Bonawar's anti-corruption unit mirrors the real-life KPK, Corruption Eradication Commission, which has faced assassination attempts against its investigators. The decision to kill Wahyu rather than arrest him comments on Indonesia's extrajudicial killings of alleged criminals, which human rights groups have condemned for decades. Rama's impossible position, protecting his family by abandoning them, reflects the choices faced by real undercover officers who lose their families to the job. The film's nihilistic ending rejects Hollywood's rehabilitative violence, suggesting that fighting corruption only creates more corruption in its wake. Bijo's betrayal of Yuko in the final scene demonstrates that ambition without loyalty leaves one vulnerable to the same tactics one used against others. The Goto clan's offer to employ Rama represents the film's darkest possibility, that the only escape from one criminal organization is joining another. Rama's refusal of this offer constitutes his only remaining act of authentic choice, a decision with no strategic value but immense moral weight. The final image of Rama alone with his knife against an army echoes the opening of the first film, creating a cyclical structure that suggests violence never ends. Critics who call the film nihilistic miss its subtle affirmation that choosing to fight despite certain defeat is itself meaningful. The film's treatment of father-son relationships across 3 generations, Bangan Yuko, Goto Keiichi, and Rama's absent father, creates a structural motif about inheritance and rebellion. Every father in the film fails his son by either controlling too much or too little, suggesting no correct parenting exists within criminal worlds. Rama's survival without resolution denies audiences catharsis, forcing them to sit with the uncomfortable reality that most undercover officers never receive Hollywood endings. The production history of The Raid 2 involved significant challenges that shaped the final film's character and quality. Gareth Evans wrote the screenplay during the promotional tour for the first film, scribbling scenes on airplane napkins and hotel notepads across 3 continents. The budget of $4.5 million was raised through a combination of Indonesian investors, American distributors, and Evans's own production company mortgaging its assets. Filming lasted 100 days, nearly 4 times longer than the first film's production schedule, due to the increased complexity of action sequences. Iko Uwais suffered a cracked rib during the prison fight, but continued filming for 2 weeks before seeking medical attention. Julie Estelle's hammer training caused repetitive stress injuries in both wrists, requiring daily physical therapy throughout the 6-month shoot. The car chase sequence required closing Jakarta's main freeway for 4 nights, paying local businesses compensation for lost revenue. Indonesian censors demanded cuts to several scenes, including the face-burning sequence, which Evans restored for the international release. The film's final kitchen set was built twice after the first version was deemed insufficiently dangerous for the required choreography. Sisep Arif Rahman was discovered by Evans through a YouTube video of the martial artist performing karambit forms in his backyard. Yayan Ruin requested that his character Prakoso die heroically rather than as a villain, seeking to play a different moral register than Mad Dog. The prison riot involved 150 extras, many of whom were actual former inmates hired for their authentic movement patterns. Evans served as his own editor, spending 8 months cutting the film because no other editor understood the rhythm of his action sequences. The sound design team recorded over 500 separate impact sounds, categorizing them by weapon type and body part struck. Sony Pictures Classics acquired U.S. distribution rights after a midnight screening at the Sundance Film Festival, paying $1 million for the privilege. The film's theatrical release was delayed 4 months to avoid competing with The Raid, Redemption's re-release in some markets. Character psychology in The Raid 2 operates through visual storytelling rather than expository dialogue, rewarding attentive viewers with deeper understanding. Rama's hands are frequently shown trembling after fights, revealing that his calm exterior masks physical and emotional trauma. Yuko's habit of touching his father's shoulder before speaking suggests desperate longing for physical affection that Bangun refuses to provide. Bijo's immaculate white clothing throughout the film symbolizes his belief that he can commit crimes without getting blood on his hands. Hammer Girl's complete silence is never explained, leaving audiences to wonder whether she is mute by choice or by trauma. Baseball Batman's nervous tapping betrays anxiety beneath his intimidating exterior, suggesting he uses violence to manage his own fear. Prakoso's gentle treatment of stray cats in Bangun's compound reveals the tenderness he cannot express toward human beings. Bangun's office contains photographs of Yuko as a child, indicating that the father once loved the son before disappointment curdled that love into contempt. Goto's meticulous tea ceremony before the negotiation scene demonstrates that he treats crime as an art form requiring patience and precision. Keiichi's single line of dialogue in the entire film, "Father, the car is ready," makes his observation of violence more unsettling than active participation. Eika's sacrifice reveals that his apparent cowardice throughout the film was actually strategic patience, waiting for the right moment to act. Bonower's complete absence from the final third of the film suggests that the police abandoned Rama once he served their purposes. The assassin's lack of identifying features, no tattoos, no scars, no distinctive clothing, makes him a pure instrument of violence without personal identity. Rama's refusal to speak about his family after the prologue indicates that thinking about them would make his mission impossible to endure. Yuko's final expression when shot by Bijo mixes surprise with recognition, as if he always knew betrayal would be his end. The film's final shot of Rama's face shows neither triumph nor despair but something more disturbing: emptiness, the void left when violence consumes everything else. The film's relationship to genre conventions involves both faithful homage and deliberate subversion of audience expectations. Like The Godfather, The Raid 2 uses a baptism scene, the prison riot, to to mark a character's transformation from innocent to participant in violence. Unlike The Godfather, which romanticizes the Corleone family's loyalty, The Raid 2 shows criminal bonds as purely transactional and instantly breakable. The film references John Woo's heroic bloodshed genre, but removes the emotional catharsis that Woo provides after his action sequences. Evans includes the mandatory undercover cop scene where the protagonist almost reveals himself, but he refuses the usual rescue that saves the hero from consequences. The trope of the mentor figure sacrificing himself for the hero appears in Ika's death, but the sacrifice accomplishes nothing beyond momentary survival. The final boss fight follows the traditional structure of escalating difficulty, but the hero emerges so damaged that victory feels indistinguishable from defeat. The film rejects the action movie convention of the hero rejecting the villain's world by having Rama genuinely tempted by Goto's offer. The love interest subplot is entirely absent from the sequel, acknowledging that Rama's family exists only as motivation rather than character. The film includes the required training montage, but subverts it by showing Rama learning nothing. His skills are static, only his will is tested. The car chase concludes not with a spectacular explosion, but with a quiet, intimate murder in the back seat of a stationary vehicle. The film's use of slow motion is reserved exclusively for moments of emotional impact rather than action, reversing typical genre priorities. The villain's monologue before killing the hero is subverted when Bijo shoots Yuko without any speech, preferring efficiency to drama. The sequel's expanded runtime allows for character development that most action films sacrifice for pacing, but this development makes the violence harder to enjoy. The film's violence is never accompanied by triumphant music, only silence or discordant industrial sounds that deny viewers emotional release. By refusing genre conventions that make violence pleasurable, The Raid 2 forces audiences to confront what action cinema usually obscures. The film's soundscape operates as a hidden narrative layer, telling stories that visuals alone cannot communicate. Every weapon in the film has a distinct acoustic signature, allowing viewers to identify threats before seeing them. Hammer Girl's weapons produce a high-pitched ring on impact, suggesting the resonance of metal against bone rather than flesh. Baseball Batman's swings generate a low-frequency whoosh that creates physical discomfort in theater sound systems calibrated for bass. The Karambit's cuts produce a tearing sound rather than a slicing sound, emphasizing the weapon's ripping action over slashing. Evans instructed the sound team to avoid Hollywood-style swoosh sounds for punches, using only the impact sounds recorded on set. The prison riot's mud produces squelching footsteps that anchor the scene in physical reality despite its choreographed nature. Rain sounds in the prison sequence were recorded during an actual Jakarta monsoon, giving the audio authentic frequency distribution. The car chase intercuts engine roars with breathing sounds from the fighters, reminding viewers of human vulnerability within the metal machines. Train sounds in the Hammer Girl sequence shift from rhythmic clicks to screaming metal as the fight intensifies, mirroring emotional escalation. The kitchen fight uses the hiss of gas stoves and the bubble of boiling water as ambient threats that could kill without direct contact. Silence is deployed strategically after major character deaths, forcing audiences to sit with the weight of what they just witnessed. Dialogue is often mixed lower than action sounds, suggesting that words matter less than physical truth in this world. The film's musical score by Joseph Trapanese and Aria Prayogi uses gamelan instruments processed through distortion pedals, creating traditional sounds made ugly. Recurring musical motifs attached to characters, with Yuko's theme incorporating discordant notes that never resolve to a harmonic center. The final shot's lack of music, only the sound of Rama's breathing and distant police sirens, leaves the film's emotional register ambiguous and uncomfortable. The film's visual language employs color grading and camera movement to communicate psychological states without dialogue. The prison sequences are drained of color until only brown and gray remain, reflecting Rama's loss of hope and identity. Bijo's scenes are saturated with sickly yellow-green light, suggesting the jaundiced corruption of his ambition. Bangan's office uses warm amber tones that paradoxically feel comforting despite the violence planned within those walls. The Goto clan's headquarters employs cool blues and whites, creating emotional distance between Japanese and Indonesian characters. Hammer Girl's subway fight introduces red lighting only after blood is spilled, as if the environment responds to violence. The car chase uses natural daylight that gradually dims as the sequence progresses, creating a countdown to darkness. Evans's camera movements shift from steady during dialogue to handheld during action, making violence feel less controlled than conversation. The film avoids the shaky cam technique common in American action cinema, keeping the frame stable enough to appreciate choreography. Long takes dominate the action sequences, with the kitchen fight featuring several shots lasting over 30 seconds without cuts. Close-ups of weapons entering bodies are framed to show only the point of impact, allowing viewers' imaginations to fill the rest. Wide shots of the prison riot establish spatial geography, so that every subsequent close-up has positional meaning. The film uses rack focus to shift attention between foreground and background fighters, acknowledging that violence happens simultaneously rather than sequentially. Low-angle shots of Rama make him appear heroic early in the film, but those same angles become threatening as his moral compromise deepens. High-angle shots of Iko make him seem pathetic even when he is winning, suggesting the film's contempt for his ambition. The final shot's framing isolates Rama against an empty background, erasing context and leaving only exhausted survival. The film's representation of masculinity offers a critique of traditional action hero archetypes through its depiction of male bodies in crisis. Rama's body is not idealized but shown as vulnerable, bleeding, exhausted, and frequently failing to perform as he wishes. Yuko's masculinity is revealed as performative, his violence masking deep insecurity about his father's disapproval. Bangan's power derives from his mind and his reputation, not his physical body, which is shown as aging and weak. Bijo's refusal to fight directly suggests that the most dangerous masculinity is the kind that makes others die for one's ambition. Prakoso's body shows the accumulated damage of decades of violence, serving as a prophecy of Rama's future. The assassin's perfect control over his body represents the terrifying ideal of violence without emotion or hesitation. Hammer Girl's existence as a female fighter challenges the film's male-dominated violence while still subjecting her to the male gaze. Baseball Batman's reliance on a phallic weapon invites psychoanalytic readings about displaced sexual aggression and frustration. The film contains no scenes of male bonding through violence, rejecting the genre's tradition of violence as friendship. Every male relationship in the film is transactional, with loyalty purchased rather than earned through mutual respect. Fathers and sons cannot communicate except through violence, suggesting that patriarchy destroys the emotional vocabulary required for love. The film's men express affection only by killing for each other, reducing all feeling to its most destructive possible expression. Rama's refusal to speak about his family suggests that traditional masculinity prohibits emotional vulnerability, even when that vulnerability is all he has left. The final image of Rama alone, surrounded by enemies but refusing help, encapsulates the action hero's tragic isolation. By pushing male violence to its logical extreme, The Raid 2 reveals the loneliness that lurks beneath the genre's celebration of masculine power. The film's critical reception varied significantly between Indonesian and Western audiences, reflecting different cultural relationships to on-screen violence. Indonesian critics praised the film's depiction of Jakarta's geography as authentic rather than touristic, recognizing specific neighborhoods and landmarks. Western critics focused more on action choreography than cultural context, treating Indonesia as a setting rather than a subject. Some Indonesian viewers found the film's depiction of police corruption too accurate for comfort, preferring escapist fantasies of clean officers. Western action fans celebrated the film's violence as art, while Indonesian censors demanded cuts to the same sequences for public screening. The film's use of Japanese characters and language was read by Indonesian audiences as acknowledgement of Japan's economic influence in Southeast Asia. Western interpretations often missed the film's commentary on Suharto-era politics, focusing instead on its similarities to familiar gangster films. Indonesian martial artists praised the film's authentic silent techniques, recognizing specific styles from different regions of the archipelago. Western martial arts fans often misidentified silat as Indonesian kung fu, erasing its distinct historical development. The film's budget of $4.5 million seemed modest to Western observers, but represented a major Indonesian production, among the most expensive ever made. Indonesian box office returns were strong but not record-breaking, as local audiences preferred comedies and romances to graphic violence. Western distributors struggled to market the film, unsure whether to sell it as art film or grindhouse exploitation. The film's 150-minute runtime tested the patience of some Western critics who would accept similar lengths from European art cinema. Indonesian audiences accustomed to longer films did not complain about pacing, finding the character development essential to emotional impact. The film's ending was read by Indonesian viewers as realistic rather than nihilistic, reflecting genuine pessimism about institutional reform. Western viewers more accustomed to Hollywood happy endings found the final shot despairing, revealing different cultural expectations about justice. The film's influence on subsequent martial arts cinema can be traced through specific techniques and stylistic choices adopted by later productions. The John Wick films explicitly credit the Raid series for inspiring their commitment to practical stunt work and long-take action sequences. The Night Comes for Us, directed by Timo Tjahjanto, functions as an unofficial sequel in style if not narrative, sharing cast members and choreographic language. Netflix's martial arts output increasingly favors Indonesian talent, with the Raid alumni appearing in Fistful of Vengeance and Wu Assassins. Hollywood action films have begun hiring Indonesian fight coordinators, importing silent techniques into American productions. The film's kitchen fight has been parodied, homaged, and referenced in everything from animated series to video game cutscenes. Sisep Arif Rahman's Karambit work spawned 1,000 YouTube tutorials, with fans attempting to replicate his techniques in home videos. Julie Estelle's Hammer Girl inspired a wave of female action heroes wielding unconventional weapons rather than swords or guns. The film's car chase sequence influenced the highway fight in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which copies its structure of external chase and internal fight. Independent action filmmakers cite The Raid 2 as proof that low budgets need not limit ambition, only creativity. The film's use of practical effects over CGI has become a rallying cry for action purists tired of digital spectacle. Evans's refusal to cast Western stars in leading roles proved that international audiences would accept subtitled action films with unknown actors. The film's success opened doors for other Southeast Asian action cinema, including Thai, Vietnamese, and Filipino productions seeking global distribution. Video game developers have studied the film's level design, noting how each fight takes place in a distinct environment with unique tactical challenges. The film's sound design has been analyzed in academic papers about the role of audio in choreographing perceived violence. Future action filmmakers will study The Raid 2 not as a template to copy, but as a challenge to exceed, pushing the genre toward new possibilities. The film's thematic treatment of justice versus law raises uncomfortable questions about whether Rama remains a hero by the end of the story. He has killed dozens of people, many of whom were low-level employees following orders, rather than masterminds of corruption. He has abandoned his family to an uncertain fate, trusting Bunowar's protection despite Bunowar's demonstrated willingness to murder. He has allowed Yuko to commit patricide without intervening, prioritizing his cover over an innocent, by criminal standards, life. He has destroyed Bangan's organization only to see Bijo and the Gota clan fill the resulting power vacuum. The police who sent him into this mission have provided no extraction, no backup, and no acknowledgement of his sacrifice. The anti-corruption unit that Rama serves has been revealed as corrupt as the criminals it fights, just more selective about its violence. Rama's only consistent action throughout the film has been survival, not justice, making him morally indistinguishable from any other thug. The film denies viewers the comfort of believing that Rama's violence serves a greater good, as that greater good never materializes. Bangan's death removes a stabilizing force from Jakarta's underworld, likely increasing violence rather than decreasing it. Bijo's death at Yuko's hands, before Rama finishes Yuko, leaves the criminal ecosystem leaderless and therefore more chaotic. The Gota clan's survival and continued power suggest that foreign criminal interests will dominate Jakarta's future rather than local bosses. Rama's refusal of Gotus offer constitutes moral heroism, but practical foolishness, as joining would protect his family, while rejecting leaves them vulnerable. The film's title, Barandal, applies as accurately to Rama at the end as to any character, his official identity erased completely. No badge, no commendation, no reunion scene restores Rama's status as a police officer within the film's narrative. The audience must decide whether Rama remains a hero through intention alone, even when his actions produce no measurable justice. The film's use of space and architecture transforms Jakarta into a multi-level battlefield where every environment offers different tactical possibilities. The prison's open yard allows for group fights requiring spatial awareness of multiple attackers approaching from different angles. Bangan's office tower confines action to corridors and rooms, forcing fighters to adapt silent techniques for close quarters. Bijo's warehouse features high ceilings and industrial equipment, allowing fighters to climb, swing, and use vertical space. The subway train's narrow aisles limit movement to linear attacks and retreats, changing the geometry of combat. The car's interior is the most restrictive environment, with fighters unable to extend limbs fully or maneuver around opponents. The kitchen's multiple stations create natural cover and hazards, with fighters using appliances as both shields and weapons. Each environment in the film has its own rhythm, with fight pacing dictated by spatial constraints rather than arbitrary choreography. Evans storyboarded each location before writing dialogue, treating architecture as a character that shapes narrative possibilities. The film's transitions between environments, prison to car to train to kitchen, create a journey through Jakarta's social strata. Upper-class locations like Bangan's office are cleaner, but more morally corrupt than lower-class spaces like the prison. The Goto clan's traditional Japanese architecture contrasts with Bijo's modern warehouse, suggesting different relationships to the past. The final kitchen's industrial sterility strips away all cultural markers, leaving only the bare fact of two men trying to kill each other. Evans's camera moves through these spaces as if exploring them for the first time, discovering tactical possibilities alongside the characters. The film's production design created each location from scratch rather than using existing spaces, ensuring optimal sightlines for action photography. The attention to architectural detail rewards repeated viewings, as background elements often become weapons or obstacles during fights. The film's representation of time operates differently in action and dialogue scenes, creating a subjective experience that mirrors Rama's consciousness. Dialogue scenes unfold in real time, with no temporal jumps within conversations, creating naturalistic pacing. Action scenes employ temporal distortion, with slow motion reserved for moments of emotional significance rather than physical impact. The film's 150-minute runtime feels shorter than its actual length because action sequences accelerate perceived time through rhythmic editing. Long takes during fights create the illusion of continuous time, even when multiple takes were edited together seamlessly. The prison riot uses overlapping action, with multiple fights occurring simultaneously in the frame, suggesting time's multiplicity. The car chase intercuts external and internal views, creating temporal dissonance between the chase's duration and the fight's duration. Hammer Girl's train fight uses the train's movement as a clock, with stations passing to mark the battle's progress. The kitchen fight contains no cuts longer than 3 seconds during its most intense passages, accelerating perceived time through rapid editing. Quiet moments between fights stretch interminably, as the audience waits with Rama for the next inevitable explosion of violence. The film's flashbacks are notably absent, suggesting that Rama has no past to revisit, only present survival. Night and day cycles appear only twice in the film, compressing weeks of undercover work into a dreamlike temporal suspension. Characters age only through accumulated injuries rather than elapsed time, with wounds as the film's only calendar. The final scene's ambiguous temporal placement, immediate aftermath or hours later, leaves Rama suspended in a perpetual present of violence. Evans's refusal to show Rama's family after the prologue means the film has no temporal anchor outside the criminal underworld. By the film's end, the audience has lost track of how long Rama has been undercover, sharing his disorientation and exhaustion. The film's moral philosophy rejects utilitarianism, greatest good for greatest number, in favor of a grim ethics of survival. Rama does not calculate whether his mission will save more lives than it costs. He simply follows orders to protect his family. Bangan's utilitarian approach, accepting some crime to prevent more crime, leads to his death at his son's hands. Bijo's pure self-interest represents the film's most consistent moral system, however repugnant that system may be. Yuko's attempts to justify his violence through appeals to honor and respect fool no one, least of all the audience. The film contains no character who acts from genuine altruism, only characters who act from self-interest and claim altruism as cover. Iko's sacrifice comes closest to genuine selflessness, but his death achieves nothing, calling the value of sacrifice into question. Bunawar's manipulation of Rama uses the language of the greater good to justify the same violence criminals use. The film suggests that all moral systems collapse under sufficient pressure, leaving only the will to survive. Rama's final refusal of Gotu's offer is irrational from a utilitarian perspective, as joining would protect his family. This irrational choice constitutes the film's only moral act, precisely because it serves no strategic purpose. The film rejects the action genre's typical moral calculus, where killing bad guys is automatically good regardless of context. Each of Rama's kills is shown as traumatic, depleting him rather than empowering him, suggesting violence's moral cost. The film offers no redemption through violence, no cleansing of the soul through combat, only accumulation of trauma. By the film's end, Rama has killed more people than any villain, yet the audience still roots for him, exposing our own moral hypocrisy. The Raid 2 forces viewers to confront uncomfortable questions about what they celebrate when they cheer for action heroes. The film's production challenges in Indonesia required creative solutions that shaped the final product's distinctive character. Local authorities initially denied filming permits for the car chase, believing the production was actually documenting gang violence. Evans spent 3 months negotiating with Jakarta's police department, eventually agreeing to include officers as extras in the film. The prison riot sequence required hiring actual former inmates as extras, as professional actors could not convincingly portray violent desperation. Iko Uwais performed his own stunts despite a pre-existing back injury, wearing a brace hidden under his prison uniform. Julie Estelle's hammer training caused blisters that became infected, requiring antibiotics and 2 weeks of modified filming. The car used for the interior fight sequence was mounted on a gimbal that simulated movement, with actual driving filmed separately. Evans edited the film on a laptop in his Jakarta apartment because post-production facilities lacked sufficient processing power. The sound team recorded Foley effects in a friend's garage, using household items to simulate weapon impacts. Sisep Arif Rahman's karambit was a genuine weapon, not a prop, because replicas could not achieve the required acoustic properties. Yayan Ruyan choreographed his own death scene, requesting specific camera angles to make his character's fall look authentic. The kitchen set was built with rubber appliances that could be struck safely, but the floor was concrete to force careful footwork. Multiple injuries occurred during the final fight, with Uwais receiving stitches for a cut above his eye during the climactic exchange. Evans served as his own stunt driver for the car chase, as no professional driver understood the sequence's choreographic requirements. The film's final cut was delivered to Sony Pictures Classics on a hard drive carried by Evans personally to Los Angeles. Despite these challenges, the film finished production under budget, a testament to the crew's efficiency and dedication. The film's opening shot of Rama's exhausted face from the first movie's finale immediately establishes continuity, while signaling tonal evolution towards psychological depth. Gareth Evans chose to begin the Raid 2 with no recap or title card, trusting audiences to remember the previous films ending perfectly. Bunowar's office contains photographs of other undercover officers on the wall, suggesting Rama is merely the latest sacrifice to a perpetual war. The execution of Wahyu occurs off-screen, with only a gunshot and Bunowar's Lanku expression confirming the death's reality. Rama's hands tremble as he watches Bunowar clean his weapon, the first of many close-ups emphasizing physical vulnerability. The decision to make Rama a ghost officer erases his legal identity, meaning no court would ever recognize his actions as legitimate police work. Bunowar's explanation that corruption reaches the highest levels implicates the Indonesian president and parliament without naming specific figures. The film's title card appears over an aerial shot of Jakarta's sprawling slums, contrasting the city's beauty with its hidden violence. Evans deliberately cast actors who could perform silent acting, as much of the film's emotional weight falls on expressions rather than dialogue. The prison's establishing shot shows watchtowers and razor wire, visual reminders that Rama has traded one cage for another larger cage. Yuko's first appearance shows him being visited by his father's lawyers, establishing his privileged status within the prison hierarchy. The other inmates treat Yuko with fearful respect, demonstrating that Bangan's power extends even into state custody. Rama's cellmate asks why a young man like him would waste his life in prison, a question Rama cannot honestly answer. The prison's daily routines are shown in montage, creating a sense of temporal passage before the riot erupts. Every character in the prison wears identical uniforms, visually erasing individuality before violence reveals true nature. The prison riot's choreography required each extra to have a distinct fighting style, preventing the sequence from becoming an undifferentiated brawl. Evans filmed the mud fight in chronological order over 5 nights, with actors becoming genuinely exhausted as the sequence progressed. The rain machines used water heated to body temperature, preventing hypothermia during night shoots in Jakarta's cool season. Yuko's rescue by Rama involves a specific silent technique called kunchan, a joint lock that controls without permanent damage. The knife Rama uses to save Yuko was a rubber prop, but the actor playing the attacker still received bruises from repeated takes. Yuko's gratitude after the rescue is performative rather than genuine, a distinction Evans conveys through Arifin Putra's micro-expressions. The prison warden's acceptance of Yuko's demand to release Yuda demonstrates that Bangun's money corrupts every level of society. Rama's release paperwork shows his forged identity as Yuda bin Suharto, the surname ironically referencing Indonesia's former dictator. The transition from prison to freedom uses no musical cue, only the sound of rain fading into car engine noise. Yuko's car contains leather seats and air conditioning, immediate sensory proof of his father's wealth compared to prison's deprivation. Rama's first view of Jakarta from Yuko's window shows the city as a maze of opportunity and danger, beautiful and threatening simultaneously. The drive to Bangun's compound passes through neighborhoods representing every social class, from street vendors to gated mansions. Bangun's first appearance shows him feeding koi fish in a garden pond, a traditional Javanese symbol of patience and prosperity. The father's embrace of his son is brief and formal, lacking the warmth Yuko desperately craves throughout the film. Bangun's eyes linger on Yuda with suspicion, suggesting that Rama's cover may already be compromised from the first meeting. The film's treatment of Bangun's organization as a legitimate business operation draws from real Indonesian conglomerates that control legal and illegal sectors simultaneously. Bangun's office contains a university degree in economics, revealing that he was once a respectable citizen before choosing crime. The photographs on Bangun's wall show him with politicians and police chiefs, visual evidence of his integration into legitimate society. Bangun's wife never appears in the film, suggesting either death or deliberate exclusion from the criminal world. Yuko's mother is mentioned once as having left when he was small, explaining his desperate need for paternal approval. The organization's daily operations include taxi companies, construction firms, and nightclubs, all fronts for money laundering and extortion. Bijo's introduction at a business meeting shows him dressed in a Western suit, contrasting with Bangun's traditional batik shirt. The tension between Bangun and Bijo during their first conversation involves no raised voices, only polite threats wrapped in formal language. Bangun's offer of coffee to Bijo uses Javanese etiquette as a weapon, forcing Bijo to accept hospitality before conflict. Bijo's refusal to drink the coffee would constitute an unforgivable insult, so he sips while visibly hating every moment. The meeting concludes with both men smiling, their faces saying peace while their eyes promise murder. Prakoso's presence at the meeting as silent security reminds everyone that violence underlies every business discussion. The Japanese mafia's representative arrives late deliberately, a power move that Bangun notes, but cannot punish. Keiichi's bow to Bangun is exactly the correct depth, neither too deep submissive, nor too shallow disrespectful. Goto's absence from the meeting signals that Bangun does not rank high enough to warrant the clan leader's personal attention. Rama's first assignment as Yuko's driver involves collecting protection money from a market, a deliberately mundane task that reveals crime's boring reality. The market vendors pay without resistance, suggesting that Bangun's protection actually provides value against other criminals. Yuko's impatience with the routine collection reveals his hunger for more exciting violence, the first sign of his dangerous ambition. The drive back to Bangun's compound passes a school where children play, reminding Rama what he has sacrificed for his mission. Yuko asks Yuda why he killed the man in prison, testing whether Rama's story about being a thug holds up under scrutiny. Rama's answer, that the man owed him money, is deliberately banal, the kind of motive a real criminal would actually have. Yuko accepts this answer because it matches his limited understanding of how the world works, valuing simplicity over truth. The film's pacing slows dramatically during these dialogue scenes, allowing audiences to catch their breath before next action sequence. Evans uses the quiet moments to develop Yuko's character, showing his cruelty toward servants and kindness toward dogs. The contrast between Yuko's treatment of humans versus animals reveals his damaged psychology, valuing loyalty he cannot recognize in people. Rama observes everything during these quiet scenes, storing information that will later be transmitted to Bunawar through dead drops. The bug placed in Yuko's wallet required Iko Uwais to perform sleight-of-hand magic, a skill he learned specifically for this role. Bunawar's receipt of Rama's intelligence shows him listening through headphones in a van parked blocks away. The information Rama provides is mostly useless. Conversations about restaurant reservations and sports scores, building frustration for both characters. The film refuses to make undercover work glamorous, showing instead the boredom, fear, and moral numbness that constitute real espionage. The assault on Topan, the porn producer, introduces moral ambiguity by making Rama's target genuinely evil rather than sympathetically criminal. Topan's office contains photographs of him with underage girls, visual evidence that he deserves far worse than the beating he receives. Yuko's enjoyment of the violence exceeds professional necessity, revealing his sadistic streak beneath the ambitious exterior. Rama's participation in the beating is reluctant but convincing, his face showing disgust that Yuko misreads as toughness. The scene where Yuko forces Topan to watch his own office burn includes dialogue about respect that Yuko fundamentally misunderstands. Topan's pleas for mercy are ignored not because he deserves none, but because Yuko enjoys hearing them. The fire was a practical effect requiring the film's crew to have fire extinguishers ready between every take. Rama's extraction of information from Topan about Bijo's operations happens while Yuko is distracted. Invisible intelligence gathering with invisible violence. The information Rama learns, that Bijo is meeting secretly with Japanese gangsters, becomes the film's central plot engine. Yuko's decision to celebrate at a nightclub afterward shows his inability to distinguish between work and pleasure, a professional weakness. The nightclub scene features actual Jakarta socialites as extras, blurring the line between fiction and documentary. Rama's refusal of alcohol maintains his cover as a Muslim thug while keeping his mind sharp for the mission. Yuko's drunken confession about his father's disappointment includes tears, the first genuine emotion he has shown in the film. The confession happens in a car rather than a private room, suggesting Yuko trusts cars as confessional spaces after the prison rescue. Rama's face during Yuko's confession shows pity mixed with contempt, a complex emotional register Iko Uwais sustains perfectly. The scene ends with Yuko vomiting, a deliberately unglamorous reminder that alcohol reveals rather than creates character. Prakoso's investigation of Bijo's operations unfolds through visual storytelling rather than dialogue, rewarding attentive viewers with deeper understanding. The character's habit of feeding stray cats recurs throughout the film, establishing tenderness as his defining trait beneath the violence. Prakoso's apartment contains photographs of a woman and child, suggesting a family lost to the criminal life he cannot escape. The photographs are never discussed, leaving audiences to imagine whether the family died or simply abandoned him. Prakoso's fighting style differs from Rama's by emphasizing efficiency over expression, every movement conserving energy for the next opponent. The scene where Prakoso follows one of Bijo's men through Jakarta's markets uses actual hidden cameras, giving the sequence documentary authenticity. The man Prakoso follows never notices his tail, demonstrating the assassin's skill at moving through crowds without drawing attention. Bijo's warehouse contains shipping containers from Japan, suggesting his alliance with the Goto clan involves smuggling rather than simple betrayal. Prakoso's discovery of the Japanese weapons inside the containers confirms his suspicion that Bijo has allied with Bangan's enemies. The fight where Prakoso kills several of Bijo's men is shot in a single take, lasting over 2 minutes without any visible cuts. Evans's camera follows Prakoso through the warehouse, sometimes leading him and sometimes trailing behind like a documentary cameraman. The kills in this sequence are faster and less showy than the film's other fights, reflecting Prakoso's professional efficiency. Each of Prakoso's movements serves a purpose, no wasted energy on style or intimidation of already dead opponents. The sequence ends with Prakoso standing over bodies, breathing hard, having accomplished nothing except delaying the inevitable war. Bijo's reaction to the warehouse attack is calm, revealing that he expected Bangun to discover his betrayal eventually. The film's moral center shifts during this sequence, as Prakoso becomes the most sympathetic character despite being a career criminal. Hammer Girl's introduction in Bijo's warehouse establishes her through sound before sight, her hammers tapping against metal creating dread through audio alone. Julie Estelle's physical transformation for the role required gaining muscle mass while maintaining flexibility, a difficult training balance. The character's costume, a hoodie and jeans, makes her indistinguishable from any young woman on Jakarta's streets until weapons appear. Bijo's dialogue with Hammer Girl is one-sided, with Bijo speaking and Hammer Girl listening without ever responding verbally. The film never explains why Hammer Girl does not speak, leaving audiences to wonder whether she is mute, traumatized, or simply choosing silence. Baseball Batman's introduction shows him practicing swings against a concrete pillar, each impact sending dust into the air. The duo's first appearance together shows them eating noodles in silence, their synchronization suggesting years of partnership without words. Bijo's confidence in Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman reflects his understanding that specialized weapons defeat generalist fighters every time. The scene where Bijo tests Hammer Girl's reflexes by throwing a bottle shows her shattering it mid-air, establishing superhuman speed. Baseball Batman's strength is demonstrated by his casual destruction of a brick wall with 3 swings, establishing power to match her speed. The duo's contrasting fighting styles, she attacks fast and multiple times, he attacks slow and once, create tactical problems no single fighter can solve. Bijo's recruitment of the duo involved paying their families enough money to live for generations, ensuring absolute loyalty. The film's sound design gives each hammer strike a different pitch depending on which hammer Estelle uses during the sequence. Baseball Batman's weapon is wrapped in tape that peels with each swing, showing where that mirrors his opponent's bodies. The duo's lack of dialogue makes them more terrifying than any speaking villain, as audiences cannot predict their motivations or limits. The negotiation scene between Bangun and the Goto clan represents the film's dramatic peak, where words become weapons more dangerous than any hammer or bat. The room where negotiations occur was designed to feel like a pressure cooker, with low ceilings and no windows to escape visual scrutiny. Goto's refusal to sit at the same table as Bangun establishes dominance through spatial arrangement, forcing Bangun to look up at him. The tea served during negotiations is real and was consumed during takes, forcing actors to drink between lines without breaking character. Bangun's offer to share territory with the Japanese reflects his understanding that peaceful coexistence profits everyone involved in the long term. Goto's counteroffer of reduced tribute demands recognition that Bangun has been overpaying for protection he does not actually need. Yuko's interruption of the negotiation violates every rule of Javanese and Japanese etiquette simultaneously, a double insult his father cannot forgive. The younger Goto's visible anger at Yuko's rudeness suggests that Keiichi shares his father's values despite lacking his patience. Bangun's apology to Goto includes a traditional Javanese bow that humiliates Yuko more than any punishment could. Goto's acceptance of the apology is grudging, his face showing contempt he cannot express without losing face himself. The scene's editing uses shot-reverse shot patterns that become increasingly rapid as tension builds toward explosion. Yuko's forced apology to Goto is delivered through gritted teeth, his hands shaking with rage he barely contains. The negotiation concludes with no agreement reached, merely an avoidance of immediate war that everyone knows is coming. Bangun's physical beating of Yuko afterward occurs in private, the closed door hiding violence that mirrors the negotiation's hidden aggression. The beating's sound effects, thuds and cries, were recorded separately to avoid injuring Arifin Putra during filming. Bangun's tears while beating his son reveal that the violence hurts the father as much as the son, a complexity rarely shown in action cinema. Yuko's decision to ally with Bijo against his father stems from psychological damage rather than rational calculation, making his betrayal tragic rather than villainous. The scene where Yuko meets Bijo in a deserted factory uses lighting that splits Yuko's face into light and shadow, symbolizing his divided loyalties. Bijo's manipulation of Yuko involves flattery about his potential, telling the son everything the father never said aloud. Yuko's agreement to kill his own father comes after a long pause, during which his face cycles through multiple emotions before settling on determination. The film's soundtrack during this scene uses low cello notes that suggest funeral music, foreshadowing the death to come. Yuko's demand that Bijo allow him to confront Bangun alone reveals that patricide must be personal, not delegated to assassins. Bijo's agreement includes secret conditions. His assassins will be nearby in case Yuko loses his nerve at the critical moment. The scene where Yuko visits his father's office for the final time shows him noticing details he never appreciated before. photographs, books, the view from the window. Bangan's greeting of his son is warmer than usual, as if the father senses death approaching and wants to part with kindness. Yuko's hand shakes as he reaches for his gun, requiring 2 attempts before his fingers close around the grip. The gunshot that kills Bangun occurs off-screen, the sound echoing through the office like thunder in a closed room. Yuko's face after the murder shows not satisfaction but horror, as if only now understanding what he has done. Bangun's body falls across his desk, scattering papers that represent a lifetime of building an empire destroyed in seconds. The film holds on Bangun's dead face for several seconds, forcing audiences to mourn a murderer as a human being. Yuko's scream after the murder is wordless, an animal sound of grief and self-loathing that no villain's speech could match. The scene's final shot shows Yuko stepping over his father's body to sit in the boss's chair, a throne purchased with blood. Rama's arrival at Bangun's office moments after the murder creates a parallel to the first film's climax, where he also arrived too late to save someone. The blood on Yuko's hands is visible from across the room, a detail Rama notices before any dialogue is exchanged. Yuko's explanation that enemies killed his father is transparently false, but Rama cannot challenge it without revealing his cover. The scene where Rama helps Yuko dispose of Bangun's body requires him to touch the corpse of a man he respected, a moral injury worse than any physical wound. The body is wrapped in a carpet and loaded into a car, a burial method that denies Bangun the dignity he deserved despite his crimes. Yuko's assumption of power happens immediately, with lieutenants either accepting or being killed before they can refuse. Rama's position in the new organization is uncertain, as Yuko trusts him but does not know how to use his skills. The film's treatment of Bangun's death as both tragedy and justice reflects its commitment to moral complexity without easy answers. Bangun's funeral occurs off-screen, another dignity denied to a man who denied dignity to others throughout his life. Yuko's first act as boss is to order an attack on the Japanese, starting the war his father spent decades avoiding. The revelation that Rama is not alone in his mission provides momentary relief before Eika's death makes isolation permanent. Eika's decision to free Rama rather than escape himself constitutes the film's only unambiguously selfless act, performed by a minor character. The sacrifice occurs in a stairwell, a liminal space between floors that represents neither survival nor death, but something in between. Eika's final words, "Tell my son I loved him," reveal that he, like Rama, had a family sacrificed to the mission. Rama's escape from the building involves killing men who were his co-workers hours earlier, another moral line crossed without hesitation. The car chase sequence that precedes the kitchen fight required 6 months of planning and 3 weeks of shooting, making it the film's most expensive single scene. Evans storyboarded every camera angle before filming, creating a visual script that left nothing to chance or improvisation. The cars used in the chase were fitted with multiple cameras, including one inside the ashtray and another under the chassis. The driver of the hero car was a professional rally racer, capable of maneuvers that would injure ordinary drivers. The fight inside the car was choreographed to the vehicle's movements, with impacts timed to turns and bumps in the road. The actor playing the antagonist in the car suffered a concussion when a turn threw him against the camera rig. The chase's geography follows actual Jakarta roads, with landmarks visible to viewers familiar with the city. The sequence includes a moment where the hero car drives the wrong way through traffic, filmed with actual oncoming vehicles driven by stunt professionals. The crash that ends the chase was performed practically, with the car rolling 3 times before coming to rest on its roof. The camera inside the car during the crash was operated remotely, as no camera person could survive the impact safely. The scene where Rama exits the crashed car uses a single continuous shot, with Iko Uwais performing his own escape from the wreckage. The burning car behind Rama as he walks away was a practical effect, with Uwais feeling real heat on his back during the take. The sequence's editing rhythm accelerates throughout, with cuts becoming shorter as the chase reaches its climax. Evans refused to use CGI for any part of the chase, insisting that audiences can tell the difference between real and digital danger. The chase sequence has been studied by film schools as an example of how to shoot action without green screens or digital effects. The kitchen fight's choreography required CSEP Arif Rahman and Iko Uwais to train together for 4 months, developing muscle memory for every exchange. The karambit used by Rahman was sharpened for close-up shots, but replaced with a dull blade for contact during wide shots. The kitchen's layout was designed to include as many potential weapons as possible: knives, pans, boiling water, fire, and broken glass. The scene's first minute contains no cuts, a single take lasting 60 seconds before the first edit point. Evans's camera moves on a dolly track during the long take, keeping the fighters centered while the background spins around them. The moment where Rama stabs the assassin's hand to a cutting board required 17 takes, as the prop hand kept tearing. The boiling water that splashes Rama's face was actually room temperature, with sound effects suggesting heat that was not present. The fire from the gas stove was real, requiring Uwais and Rama to coordinate their movements around open flames. The fight's second half shifts from the long take to rapid editing, each cut lasting less than 2 seconds on average. The sound design for the fight uses silence during the most brutal exchanges, letting impacts speak without musical distraction. The moment where the assassin breaks Rama's fingers required a prosthetic hand for the close-up, as breaking actual bones was not feasible. Rama's use of a broken bottle as a weapon reverses the assassin's advantage, turning the kitchen's environment against its intended purpose. The fight's final exchange involves both men exhausted, their techniques reduced to desperate flailing rather than elegant silent. The assassin's death occurs when Rama drives a knife through his throat, a kill so close that their faces almost touch. The aftermath shows both men on the floor, but only one rises, and even he can barely stand. The film's treatment of the final confrontation between Rama and Iko subverts expectations by making it brief and unsatisfying rather than epic. Yuko's gunshot wounds Rama in the shoulder, relatively minor injury compared to everything the hero has already survived. The betrayal of Iko by Bijo happens in the same moment, 2 shots fired almost simultaneously from different directions. Bijo's decision to kill Iko rather than Rama reveals that his alliance with the sun was always temporary, a means to an end. Yuko's death occurs while he is looking at Rama, his final expression asking a question that will never receive an answer. Rama's killing of Iko with his own knife takes less than 3 seconds. No choreography, no struggle, just cold efficiency. The knife used was the same one Iko carried throughout the film. Poetic justice for a character defined by his weapons. Bijo's attempt to flee is stopped by Rama's thrown knife, which pins his foot to the floor like an insect in a collection. The confrontation between Rama and Bijo ends with a single punch, no fight, because Bijo was never a fighter, only a manipulator. Rama's decision to let Bijo live is ambiguous, as the film cuts away before revealing Bijo's final fate. The Goto clan's arrival surrounds Rama with dozens of armed men, a force no single fighter could defeat regardless of skill. Goto's offer to employ Rama is delivered in Japanese with English subtitles, forcing Rama to rely on translation he cannot verify. The offer includes protection for Rama's family, demonstrating that Goto has done his research and knows exactly what motivates his target. Rama's refusal of the offer is delivered without hesitation, the clearest decision he has made since the film began. The raising of Rama's knife against the Yakuza army is a gesture of defiance that cannot succeed, but must be attempted. The film's final shot freezes on Rama's face, leaving his survival ambiguous and his victory non-existent. The film's examination of post-colonial Indonesian identity emerges through its depiction of Jakarta as a city caught between tradition and globalization. Bangan's preference for Javanese customs contrasts with Bijo's Western suits, representing competing visions of Indonesia's future. The Japanese mafia's presence in Jakarta reflects real economic relationships, where Japanese capital has built much of modern Indonesia's infrastructure. The film's use of multiple languages, Indonesian, Japanese, English, Betawi, creates a linguistic hierarchy where power determines which language dominates each scene. Characters who speak English are typically Western-educated elites like Bijo, suggesting that colonialism continues through language rather than military force. The prison's architecture combines Dutch colonial designs with Indonesian adaptations, visible history in every brick and window frame. The film's violence often occurs in spaces that were once Dutch-owned, now repurposed by Indonesians for Indonesian purposes. Rama's name means joy in Sanskrit, an ironic label for a character who experiences nothing but suffering throughout both films. Yuko's name has no direct meaning, reflecting his lack of fixed identity and desperate search for definition through violence. Bangan's name means to build in Indonesian, appropriate for a character who constructed an empire from nothing. Bijo's name means lucky in Javanese, an ironic label for a character whose luck runs out in the film's final moments. The film's depiction of police corruption reflects post-colonial institutional decay, where Dutch structures were maintained without Dutch accountability. The anti-corruption unit's extrajudicial methods mirror the tactics of Dutch colonial police, suggesting that methods survive even when masters change. The film's ambivalent ending, neither victory nor defeat, reflects Indonesia's own ambivalent relationship with its colonial past and globalized present. The Raid 2 thus operates as both action spectacle and national allegory, entertaining while asking uncomfortable questions about Indonesian identity. The film's treatment of gender extends beyond Hammer Girl to include the complete absence of Rama's wife from the narrative after the prologue. The wife's face is never shown clearly in the sequel, unlike the first film where she appeared in multiple scenes. This erasure of female presence from the criminal world suggests that women exist only as motivation, not as characters with agency. The few women visible in background scenes are sex workers or servers, their roles defined entirely by male needs. The film's violence against women is notably absent, with all on-screen victims being male fighters who chose their profession. Hammer Girl's presence complicates this pattern, as she is both victim of what made her silent and perpetrator of spectacular violence. The character's silence can be read as feminist commentary on how women's voices are erased even when their bodies are celebrated. Alternatively, her silence can be read as regressive, denying her the dialogue given to every male character regardless of importance. The film's lack of female characters with speaking roles beyond Hammer Girl reflects the real-world gender imbalance in Indonesian organized crime. Evans has acknowledged this imbalance in interviews, defending it as realistic rather than ideological. The film's audience demographics skew heavily male, suggesting that the absence of female characters reflects rather than creates gender disparity. Some feminist critics have praised Hammer Girl as empowering, while others have condemned her as exploitative, the debate itself proving her complexity. The film's treatment of the wife as absent motivation rather than present character denies Rama an emotional arc involving her. The final shot's ambiguity includes no hint of reunion with family, suggesting that women exist only in the past, never the future. The Raid 2 thus presents a world where masculinity has consumed everything, leaving no space for feminine presence except as weapon or memory. The film's production design for the kitchen fight included actual food that was cooked and served to crew members between takes. The kitchen's refrigeration units contained real meat that spoiled during the long shooting schedule, requiring daily replacement. The knives visible on magnetic strips were real and sharp, requiring actors to track their positions to avoid accidental cuts. The floor was coated with non-slip material for wide shots, then degreased for close-ups where sliding would add dramatic effect. The gas stoves were connected to propane tanks that were turned off between takes, preventing accidental fires during choreography rehearsals. The boiling pots contained water heated to just below boiling, hot enough to steam, but not hot enough to cause burns on contact. The broken glass on the floor was made of sugar, edible and non-toxic, but crunchy underfoot like real glass. The blood used in the fight was a corn syrup mixture that became sticky as it dried, affecting the actor's grip on weapons. The final exchange where Rama kills the assassin required Rahman to fall backward onto a padded surface hidden by camera angle. The sound of the killing blow was created by stabbing a melon, the juice and flesh providing authentic audio texture. The scene's editing took 2 months, with Evans reviewing every frame to ensure no safety wires or pads were visible. The finished sequence contains 127 cuts across 7 minutes, an average of 1 cut every 3 seconds. The longest unbroken shot in the sequence lasts 42 seconds, during which the actors perform 30 distinct combat moves. The sequence has been analyzed frame by martial arts experts, who have identified 37 separate silent techniques. The kitchen fight is preserved in the Academy Film Archive as an example of 21st-century action choreography. The film's use of color theory assigns specific palettes to each faction, allowing audiences to track alliances through visual cues alone. Bangan's organization wears earth tones, browns, greens, and creams, connecting them to traditional Javanese culture and agriculture. Bijo's faction wears black, white, and gray, a monochrome palette that suggests moral absolutism masking flexible ethics. The Goto clan wears navy blue and silver, colors associated with Japanese corporate culture and technological precision. Hammer Girl's hoodie is gray, matching neither faction because she belongs only to Bijo as property rather than partner. Baseball Batman's jacket is black leather, reflecting his role as enforcer rather than strategist within Bijo's organization. Rama's costumes shift from police blue in the prologue to prisoner orange to enforcer black, visually tracking his moral descent. Yuko's clothing becomes darker as the film progresses, starting in light grays and ending in charcoal black after his patricide. Bangan's batik shirts become more muted after his son's betrayal, as if his color drains along with his hope. The Japanese headquarters uses cool lighting that makes the warm-colored Indonesian characters appear alien and out of place. The kitchen fight's white walls and stainless steel create a neutral background against which blood becomes shockingly red. The prison's gray concrete and brown mud eliminate color entirely, reflecting the moral vacuum of incarceration. The car chase uses natural daylight that shifts to golden hour, the warm light contrasting with the cold violence inside the vehicle. The subway fight uses fluorescent lighting that flickers at a frequency visible only in slow motion, subliminally increasing tension. The final shot's color grading desaturates everything except Rama's bloodstained shirt, focusing attention on his survival. The film's color palette thus operates as a silent narrator, telling audiences how to feel about each scene without dialogue. The film's philosophical argument about violence draws from Thomas Hobbes's concept of the state of nature, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. Rama enters the criminal underworld expecting to find order beneath the chaos, a Hobbesian social contract that criminals follow like anyone else. Instead, he finds that criminals operate in perpetual war of all against all, with alliances lasting only until advantage shifts. Bangan's attempt to impose order through negotiation represents the social contract, an agreement to limit violence for mutual benefit.